Salutations from abroad. My name is Brandon Martin, and unfortunately, I will not be able to attend this conference personally or online. So I have put together this short presentation in hope that you may find value of the critical information that I will be sharing with you today. First, I'd like to thank the organizers and the host and all of the attending audiences for taking the initiative to pay attention to such important knowledge in the turbulent time of our current political era. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here, and I think it is amazing that there are people overseas sharing the information of natural law. I am seeing it all over the world now, and it is just so exciting, even though we face such chaotic conditions in the world. So remember to always look towards that hope, the hope that truth will always endure, which is the truth, because it can never be destroyed. And without further ado, I am going to get right into the presentation. So today my presentation and talk will be called Anarchy, Beyond Disorder and Chaos, which I'm sure we have all heard quite a bit of, how anarchism is tied in with chaos. First, I'd like to start with a profound quote by Pierre Prudon, who was a renowned anarchist of his time. To be governed is to be watched, inspected, spied on, directed, law-driven, numbered, regulated, enrolled, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, checked, estimated, valued, censored, commanded by creatures who have neither the right nor the wisdom nor the virtue to do so. To be governed is to be at every operation, at every transaction noted, registered, counted, taxed, stamped, measured, numbered, assessed, licensed, authorized, admonished, prevented, forbidden, reformed, corrected, punished. It is under pretext of public utility and in the name of the general interest to be placed under contribution, drilled, fleeced, exploited, monopolized, extorted from, squeezed, hoaxed, robbed, then at the slightest resistance, the first word of complaint, to be repressed, fined, vilified, harassed, hunted down, abused, clubbed, disarmed, bound, choked, imprisoned, judged, condemned, shot, deported, sacrificed, sold, betrayed, and to crown all, mocked, ridiculed, derided, outraged, dishonored. That is government. That is its justice. That is its morality. The first thing I would like to say here is that you must go all the way. And as Buddha said, there are only two mistakes on the path to truth. One is not starting, and the other is not going all the way. A lot of people like to pitch tents on this spiritual journey of awakening. And a lot of people get stuck in cul-de-sacs in the mind and in the physical world. So we must endeavor to ensure that we always are trying to reach the summit of truth. So to get us started, let's do a little bit of etymology to understand the word anarchy. The word anarchy is derived from the Greek prefix an, meaning without or the absence of, and archon, meaning ruler, master, authority. Anarchy does not mean without rules. It literally means without rulers, masters, or authority. Coercive authority, to be precise. It means the absence of slavery. So it actually means no masters, no slaves. If you were to go out on the street and ask any individual, what's the state of no masters and no slaves? They would say freedom. But yet, in our common times around the world, we see that anarchy is associated with terrorism, chaos, disorder, and all kinds of degenerate social behaviors, which is not the case. So these are the false beliefs or axioms about anarchism, which is that anarchism means chaos or disorder or terrorism or just in general violence. And this is a form of propaganda that is intentionally being used to weaponize the term anarchy and to turn people against a true state of sovereignty, of individual sovereignty, and a true state of freedom. They want people to believe this. And this is a methodology called obfuscation, which means to take a word or to take a thing and convert it into something that it's not, and to make it less clear. So whenever we're looking at definitions of words, it's really important to understand we're trying to define them and make them more clear, right? Like a television. You have high definition TVs. It means it's more clear. You can crystally see the pixels of the television. But what we've done with a lot of our words, which is why etymology is so important, is that we've actually made them less clear and less accurate to reality. So our definitions should define something that is real and make sure that it is accurate so that it helps us to communicate our ideas and concepts to one another. So whenever somebody can control the way that we speak our words, control the meaning of the words that we speak, they're also controlling the way that we think, because we think in some form of language, whatever language, usually whatever our primary language is. Some people who are bilingual or multilingual will think in multilinguistic forms in the mind when they have their thoughts, but it is still the same. They're thinking in some form of language. Obviously, we think in pictures and symbols as well, but usually we're thinking in language. So it's really important to understand that by obfuscating the definition of words, by converting them into something that is less clear and less accurate to reality, it actually diminishes the ability for one to be able to interact with reality with those terms and words. So anarchy is not chaos. And that's pretty much what this presentation is. I could end it right here. That's it. Anarchy is not chaos. It is not terrorism. It is not disorder. It is actually antithetical to all those things. So let me define what I mean by chaos in the most general sense. So whenever we think of chaos, we're thinking of it as something that is out of control, or something that is disorderly, or something that is random, right? But what I mean by chaos is unnecessary chaos. It is forms of violence being done upon other sentient beings that have moral agency. So when I'm using the term chaos, which is what they're using it for, it implies a state of society that is in disorder, right? It implies a state of society that is at each other's throats all the time. And that's what we're living in right now. Government is actually chaos. And the word government means mind control. Gubernare mens mentes, which means gubernare means to control, and mens mentes means mind. So government is actually a form of encroachment and usurpation onto the individual's liberties. So we have to understand that they are taking something like freedom and making you believe that it's actually chaos and disorder, because they don't have a basic ideological and ethical backing for how freedom actually works. They think freedom means that there are no boundaries, there are no rules, there are no moral principles. That's what they're trying to tell you, that if you have freedom, it means you're going to violate other people's freedom. So it's going to be chaotic. But this is not the case, because freedom is a transaction between two or more individuals. That's what we mean by freedom. We're not talking about somebody that's living on their own in some isolated spot in space, right? Somewhere where they can never interact or never harm anything else in their environment or other people or other sentient beings, correct? So when we're talking about freedom, we're talking about a transactional state between individuals, which means that if you violate another person's freedom through your choice of the wrongful initiation of force, then That's not freedom. As we collectively do that, we go deeper and deeper into slavery and totalitarianism and authoritarianism. Here is a great quote from Leo Tolstoy. Even if the absence of government really did mean anarchy in the negative, disorderly sense, which is far from being the case, even then, no anarchical disorder could be worse than the position to which government has led humanity. So let's just say that hypothetically, anarchy did result in some form of chaos, which, that's possible. It depends on how you're defining chaos. But let's say it does result in some chaos. It's not going to be anywhere near the chaos that states have implemented all over the world for all of history. That is the truth. Whenever we look at examples of anarchy being chaos, it's usually in these small pockets, and then they are hyperbolic. They blow it out of proportion, right? Like anarchy is some kind of utopia where there is not going to be any kind of issues that occur, correct? So it's like, yes, we're human beings. We have flaws. Things will happen. People will make mistakes. And that kind of chaos will occur, okay? But what I'm talking about is chaos at a collective level, where you are enshrining and encapsulating chaos as a fundamental principle for your society. That is how the society will be ran. And that is not true for anarchistic or stateless societies. Anarchy is not synonymous with chaos or disorder, but rather a voluntary order arising from a mutual respect and cooperation among self-governing individuals. It rests upon the truth that human beings possess the capacity for rationality, moral judgment, and peaceful interaction, enabling them to organize society through consensual agreements and free association. It rejects the idea that any individual or institution can claim a monopoly on power and impose their will on others by the abuse of force. Instead, it upholds the principle of non-aggression and self-defense, emphasizing that individuals have the right to live their lives as they see fit, as long as they do not infringe upon the equal rights of others. It recognizes the primacy of individual freedom, voluntary exchange, wherein people engage in peaceful interaction and from voluntary association based on their shared values and interests. Anarchy advocates for the abolition of coercive institutions, particularly the state, which is viewed as an illegitimate authority that violates individual liberty and perpetuates injustice. Anarchists argue that the state's monopoly on law and order not only subjugates individuals, but also stifles competition, innovation, and progress. Anarchy, in this view, presents the opportunity for a society rooted in self-ownership, free markets, and decentralized decision-making. So that's pretty much what anarchy is. It's pretty much decentralization of the power, giving it back to the individuals. And the truth is, we can never delegate any forms of violence to other people. We can delegate rights to other people, such as my right to self-defense. I can delegate that to somebody else to help defend me or defend my personal property. But you can never delegate a violent behavior to somebody else. It is impossible. Moving on. So let's take a look at some of the ideas of anarchism through history, which, like I said, probably could have just ended the presentation there and we would have been done. Anarchism stands as a provocative and often misunderstood ideology born from a deep distrust of hierarchical authority and a yearning for individual freedom. Anarchism has weaved its way through the annals of history, leaving an indelible mark on the struggles for liberation, social justice, and the pursuit for a society built upon principles of equality and autonomy. Rooted in the belief that individuals possess the capacity for self-governance and cooperation, anarchism emerges as a forceful critique of oppressive systems and centralized power structures. And that's really important. So anarchists specifically challenge the power structures and challenge the belief systems. So they're like, this is what they would say. They would say, you have to morally justify your system to me before I align to it. If you cannot morally justify your system, if your means are not fully morally justified, then I don't care what your ends are, because there's no reason for me to participate in that system. From the writings of Pierre Joseph Prudon in the 19th century to the fiery rhetoric of Emma Goldman and Mikhail Bakunin in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, anarchism has offered a radical alternative to the prevailing quote-unquote order, and really what it is disorder. So the state is actually disorderly. And I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Look around us. Every single state throughout history has all been disorderly. All of them. Anarchism's historical narrative is closely intertwined with the struggles of marginalized community and the fight against various forms of oppression. In the labor movements of the 19th and 20th century, anarchists played a vital role advocating for worker empowerment and the abolition of exploitative labor practices and the creation of cooperative societies. They stood shoulder to shoulder with those who sought to challenge the capitalist system and enslave a world where economic and social relations were based on voluntary association and mutual aid. And it's not just the capitalist system. It's really just the statist system. That's really what it's about. But at that time period, that's what they were standing against, was capitalism, right? So we have to understand that, you know, the ideas have shifted and changed throughout history. And it's a really interesting study to watch the ideas throughout history change about anarchism and who we sympathize with. And then realizing we got burned, such as we sympathize with the Marxists for a little while, and we sympathize with the socialists, and we sympathize with the communists. We didn't really have any examples of these things for a time period. And then we ended up getting burned and executed for actually duping ourselves into believing these things. But, you know, we are where we are today, and some of those great literary authors and people who stood up at these times were amazing, principled individuals, and we should all learn from the lessons of history. Throughout history, anarchists have been at the forefront of social and political movements, their voices echoing in the fight against imperialism, colonialism, and war. From the Spanish Civil War, where anarchist militias fiercely defended their vision of stateless societies against fascism, to the grassroots movements for civil rights, gender equality, and environmental justice, anarchism has left an indelible imprint on the struggles for freedom and social transformation. Anarchism embodies a profound faith in the capacity of human beings to organize themselves harmoniously, to cooperate without coercion, and to create equitable and just societies. It calls for a reimagining of the power structure, advocating for decentralized decision-making, like I said before, and direct participation in shaping the communities we inhabit. Anarchism, like any ideological framework, is not panacea for all societal woes. And that's kind of what I was talking about the chaos that might naturally unfold. And obviously, in a time period of transitioning from a state society to an anarchistic society, there's going to be turmoil. It's going to be rocky. It's going to be bumpy. It's going to be volatile. So there's going to be chaos that arises then, because you're going to have one side who wants to stick to the authoritarian system and the other side who does not. And there's going to be a clash between these two ideologies, which is what we're seeing here today. And it's a big change that must happen. But as that chaos starts to die down, as the river of this energy starts to smooth out, everything will start to become more calm and tranquil. Once the status mindset has been pretty much eradicated from the species, that's when we'll start to see what we could consider to be true voluntary cooperation and true state of peace between each other. So it is chaos. If we want to add this in here in a specific context, anarchism is chaos for the state rulers, for the authoritarians, for the elite, because we are no longer in their control. So it's chaos for them. But in the most general sense of the definition, in the most holistic sense of the definition of chaos, it is not chaos, right? So we have to understand the context of how we're using these terms, because they can be applied as weapons against us and against our movements. It invites critical engagement, continuous reflection, and the recognition that the journey towards a more just and liberated society is an ongoing process. It challenges us to question the assumptions and structures that underpin our current systems and to strive for a more equitable and compassionate world. So what's one of the main issues that we find? This is not all of the issues, obviously. It cannot just be summed down to one thing. But I feel that this is one of the main issues that we find, especially when it comes to postmodernistic ideologies. And that issue is moral relativism. We do not have an objective basis for morality. So what is moral relativism? Moral relativism is the ideology that objective morality or universal principles do not exist inherently to nature or reality, and that rights and wrongs are relative constructs which human beings invented and are changeable according to location, time, cultural, social beliefs, and personal preferences. So what this means is that I get to decide what a right and a wrong behavior actually is. Or a group of people gets to decide what a right and wrong behavior is. Okay? And that leaves all the power in the hands of human beings, which are, their minds are erroneous in many cases. They're not virtuous. So if a rapist or a violator decides that his actions are actually moral because he gets some kind of hedonistic pleasure out of this deplorable behavior that he is committing and creating victims, then who's to say that he's wrong? Because he can just make up morality as he goes. It's relative to his own perception. So he can just make it up. And if you have more people that believe that, then people believe that it is more powerful, which is called ad populum, right? So it's the appeal to more people believing in it, which is a logical fallacy. So since more people believe in it, it must be correct. When in fact, it has nothing to do with our own personal preferences. It has to do with the consequences of the behaviors themselves. Whether those behaviors in reality actually create a victim in that condition. And if it does, then it's a wrong behavior. Hands down, no matter what, 100% objectively wrong. If it is an initiation of the wrongful use of force, which is called violence, then it is the wrong behavior. No matter what. A society that falsely enshrines the dogma that there is no objective difference between right and wrong behaviors, and that they may arbitrarily dictate or decide what right and wrong is based on their own personal preference, is a society that can never manifest true freedom. Since freedom is predicated upon the aggregate morality of a society, true freedom can never exist in a society that embraces moral relativism. It can never happen. 100% can never happen. If the entire society is enshrining the idea of moral relativism, then there is absolute no way that you can get holistic, stable, functional freedom in that society. It is an impossibility because we are not meeting the requirements of natural law. We are not meeting the requirements of true, objective, universal principles. And one of the real solutions is getting to the root causality of our issues. And I see that a lot of people are stuck in the plane of effects, stuck in the physical world, which would be the bottom half of the slide, the plane of effects, the physical world, or the manifested reality, right? The manifested realities which form because of their causes, and there is absolutely no power to affect change in this position. No power to affect change lies here. But this is where human perception is trapped. Sorry about the typo in that. And then what we need to get to is the plane of causality, which is the higher realm. It is the plane of the mind, the mental world, and it is the answer to the why, the biggest question. Why are we in this condition? All power to affect change lies here. Thus, this is where human perception must go. This is where causes are set into motion prior to manifesting as form realities. The plane of causality constitutes the why or underlying factors which precede all manifested things and events. So we have to change our minds. We have to free our minds and change our minds to actually manifest a change in reality. The way we think and the way we feel manifest into the behaviors that we are performing in physical form. So we have to change the way that we think to get to a better outcome. As an example of this, if you have a child or a person who is cutting their arm constantly, yes, you can put Band-Aids on that all you want, and that's a good treatment. But will it stop that person from actually preventing themselves from cutting themselves over and over and over? No, it will not. They have to change their minds and their hearts and their guts to actually stop doing the behavior of cutting themselves. It doesn't matter how many Band-Aids that you mass produce and put on this individual. If they continue to cut the wounds open over and over or cut themselves all over their body, then no change is occurring. It doesn't matter how you treat the symptoms of it. You have to have a prior engagement of stopping it in the mind, because it's a mental pathology. It's a psychopathology, which has to be fixed in the mind. We have to get in touch with our true mind and know ourselves. So what is natural law? Natural law is the science of morality that can directly be observed in operation in reality. The evidence of the existence of natural law is the resultant state of existence, which humanity receives as a direct result of our aggregate behaviors, which are the consequences and the human condition itself. Natural law is the governing dynamic for consequences of the behaviors from beings with the capacity to understand the difference between moral and immoral actions. Natural law are inherent moral principles in nature that are discoverable through the correct use of reason and intuition, which are universal and immutable. The law of freedom has a quantifiable effect. Aggregate freedom is directly proportional to aggregate morality. We collectively reap the result of the behavior that we collectively sow. So what this means is, as you have a society that aligns with objective morality more and more and more, you will have less and less and less violations of an individual's autonomy. And as you have a society that believes and manifests the ideas of moral relativism more and more and more, then you will have a society that degrades and degenerates freedom. Okay, so as a society becomes more immoral, then we will go further into authoritarianism and tyranny and slavery, which is where we're at now. The entire world is enslaved, and this is a war on spirituality and consciousness. And that's why we have to change the mind yet again. So that's just the basics of natural law. And this is one of my favorite authors, anarchistic authors, Lysander Spooner. He says, "A man's natural rights are his own against the whole world, and any infringement of them is equally a crime, whether committed by one man or by millions, whether committed by one man calling themselves a robber or by millions calling themselves a government." Doesn't matter how many there are. So change is necessary. The rulers of this world do not want you to become wise. If people are wise, they cannot be controlled, subjugated, and exploited. In fact, they will have the fragrance of rebellion all around them. Only the weakened and the uneducated minds follow the ideas of the false authorities of this world. Changing our minds and applying that knowledge is the only way to change the current state of things. We must reject all the illusory poison worldviews that have been grafted by social engineers to our minds from birth. The answers we seek are that of the innate truth in nature and within each and every one of us. The study of consciousness and the laws of nature are of all importance to the initiate and those who want real change. Each step towards higher consciousness is a journey made by following the heart-based intelligence instead of following the ignorance of the crowd. And as we see here, we have an anarchist who's saying, "Who wants change?" And everybody is saying, "Yes, I do." And then they say, "Who wants to change?" And then everybody puts their hands down and they're all irritated and they're all mad. And that's really what we're facing today. Everybody wants change, but really they don't want to fix themselves. They don't want to do the work on themselves. They don't want to do shadow work. and they don't want to go within to change who they actually are and how they actually think and what they feel. Voltairine declare, if this is the price to be paid for an idea, then let us pay. There is no need of being troubled about it, afraid or ashamed. This is the time to boldly say, yes, I believe in the displacement of this system of injustice by just one. I believe in the end of starvation, exposure. I believe in the human soul regnant over all laws which man has made or will make. I believe there is no peace now and there will never be peace so long as one rules over another. I believe in the total disintegration and dissolution of the principle and the practice of authority. I am an anarchist, and if for this you condemn me, I stand ready to receive your condemnation. And this is something that we all must have, the resolve and the willpower to say, yes, I am an anarchist, and you may condemn me, but I am in the right. I am morally justified, and you have to prove to me that your system is moral. And if you cannot, then I will not align to it. I will not subscribe to a system that subjugates its population. And with all that being said, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I know this was a very short presentation. I put it together very quickly, and I just wanted to hit on a few critical points. So I hope that you enjoyed this work. If you are interested, you can check out more of my work at seedtruth.com, where I have full in-depth presentations and essays on all these topics. I actually did do an in-depth podcast recently about the entire history of the anarchistic idea with James Cordner from A Hitchhiker's Guide to Truth. So thank you all for having me, and enjoy the rest of the conference.